Noreen? Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
What's up?
I sort of recognize everybody, but in case you don't know me, we have some new people. My name is Larry Schofer. I was trained as an historian a while ago, and I've taught a course here called The End of the Ottoman Empire, which made me very anxious to visit Turkey, which I did last October. So what we're going to have today are reflections on history and on tourism in Turkey together. We'll see how much of this I can get through. And I've just opened up with these two slides of the celebration of Ataturk, the father of this country. Won't mention him again, but there's a statue on one side, and on the other side, that's the mausoleum where he's buried. And that's one of the celebrations.
In Ankara.
In Ankara, yes. Ankara is the capital.
Both of those are in Ankara, Larry?
I'm not sure where that statue is. But Turkey, as you probably know, is considered in both Asia and Europe, mainly in Asia, but there's the bridge over the Bosphorus. It's sort of an artificial notion going across the bridge, but there it is. And just wanted to remind you where Turkey is. It's got the French names here, but it's easy enough to figure out what's what. Turkey. The only thing you need to know, Détroit means the straits. So the Détroit du Bosphore, or the Bosphorus Straits, or the Dardanelles Straits over here. But all around the Black Sea, you see going up here, Bulgaria, Romania, Ukraine, Russia, Georgia. For whatever reason, they don't show Armenia, which is actually pretty important for Turkish history. And this stripe thing is Crimea, as you should be aware of what's going on now. Turkey had this terrible earthquake just a few weeks ago, and I wanted to show why it's at risk. First of all, if you see, there are 4 plates, tectonic plates, converging on Turkey. You'll see, and the number one, the Eurasian plate doesn't have a number here, but it's coming. Yeah, here it is, Eurasian plate. Number 2, the Anatolian plate, which is most of Turkey. 3, the Arabian plate. And 4, the African plate moving up. So this is really an earthquake zone. And right here on the border of these 2 plates, and it's the border of Turkey and Syria, is where this terrible earthquake took place. Gaziantep. I don't know how to pronounce Turkish. But we will see that under President Erdogan, who will play a part in what I'm going to present, there's been a tremendous drive to build housing. It was very impressive. Everywhere you go, new housing. But there was a lot of corruption in building codes. They have pretty good earthquake-resistant building codes if you follow them. Under Erdogan, there were over 3 million housing units built since the beginning of the 21st century. That's a lot of housing. When you think of what we could do in Philadelphia with a few thousand, you got 3 million. But what happens is the projects are okay to start. When the inspectors leave, things go downhill. And the one evidence of this in nearby Erzincan County, I think it's over here, one township had no destruction. That is, you had honest administrators preventing the bribes that prevent shortcuts. Now, Turkey isn't, of course, the only country to have this problem, but they're really in an earthquake zone. that city of, Erzin, they said it's 60 miles from Antakya. Antakya is right over here, which really, the old Antioch, which really got blasted. And there's an example of what it looked like after the earthquake. 2022 and 2023, Turkey's been subject to terrible natural disasters. Before the earthquake, for 2 years, they had these horrible brush fires that they had a lot of trouble controlling. And then in 2023, you get another disaster. Most of this is in eastern Turkey. Rural, lots of Kurdish families as well as Turkish, but more traditionally Muslim, and we'll see why that's important for elections. Wanted to point out this history of head presidents of the country. This is Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, who's called father of his country, died in 1938. He was a military hero. He became president. He proclaimed the republic. And he was the hero of Gallipoli. We'll hope have time to look at that at the end of this. Hero of the counterattack against the Greek invasion in 1922-23. He was behind the establishment of a capital in Ankara, which is in the center of the country, away from Istanbul. He was also a mastermind of secularization of the country. For example, pushed very hard for education for women. And it's clear that that's part of Turkish society now. Or he's also he outlawed the fez. We'll see that later. But looking back in Turkish history, one of the names that gets mentioned, Suleiman the Magnificent. I don't know how you can hold your head up high with that thing, but that's a painting by Titian. And he was involved in the Ottoman Empire. You know, he conquered Belgrade, he conquered Rhodes, he conquered most of Hungary, Middle East, North Africa. And he was considered the lawgiver. Under him, you have law codes that became dominant in Turkey until the 20th century. And now we have this president, Recep Tayyip Erdogan. I don't know Turkish, and the translation there, dreams of being a neo-sultan. This is his image, and this is there's a lot of coverage in the French press in more detail, perhaps, than what we get. But this is, there's honor guard. It's sort of his stepping forth. He's prime minister from 2003. He was mayor of Istanbul, then prime minister from 2003 to 2014. And since 2014, he has been president. There is an election for president in a few weeks. The opposition is having trouble getting its act together. And even when it does, we don't know what kind of tricks he can pull. In the past, he has, when it comes time for election, he plays to his base, the rural agricultural Muslim base, and has increased the power of Islam in Turkey and tried to reduce certain things, such as controlling the universities. In 2017, there was an attempted coup, and it really gave him a chance to exert his authority. When I remember when I was in college, graduate school, we would read about one coup in Turkey after another by the army. And this ended in the 1990s, and 2017 was probably an army attempted coup, and he really has disabled the generals since then. This is sort of the tourist side. because Anatolia is really an interesting place. This is a model of Katal Hayuk, which is in the east central. 7,000 BCE. That's really early for an urban settlement, and this is what we sort of think it looks like. And these are petroglyphs from that period, and aurochs. Not sure what's a kind of an animal that we don't have anymore. And you can see the aurochs. You can see the hunters next to the aurochs there in that petroglyph. 1500 BCE. This is a sculpture of Hittite gods of the underworld. The Hittites were one of the tribes that controlled this area. The legend. One of the explanations for the Israelites in Egypt is that there was for a while the Hittites controlled Egypt, and then they were driven out. And so one notion without evidence in the Bible, it says there arose a Pharaoh who knew not Joseph. Well, the notion was the Hittites got kicked out, and then the Egyptians came back. Maybe not, but it's a nice story. And this is modern, look of Istanbul with all these mosques. You also have Greek and Roman Turkey. This is Konya, which was really a center of Turkish civilization for many years. And this is one of the best preserved Greek theaters. Although after a while, you see a lot of these theaters. They love to have them. And in Ephesus, where if you're a tourist, you're likely to be taken to Ephesus because it's close to the seashore. So even on a cruise that visits various sites, Ephesus down in the southwest, it's only a few miles from the shore. Actually, it was once on the shore, but the silting has put it inland. But this is one of the famous pictures of the library at Ephesus. The history of the Turks, you have something called the Seljuk Turks, later on the Ottoman Turks. These refer to different tribes. I mean, the Turkish tribes have been moving across Central Asia for centuries, actually, going back to the Huns in the 600s, 700s. These are Turkish tribes referring to the language, and they are tremendous warriors, mounted bowmen, and until the invention of guns, they were very difficult to defeat. They really were pretty tough. Well, the Mongols were even tougher, but we'll see that. Anyway, 1071 is this Battle of Manzikert, which was a Byzantine defeat. Remember, if you look at that map, you see Constantinople is the Byzantine capital, and then the Sultan of Rum takes over after this defeat. And it's followed by a kind of civil war among the Byzantines, different members of the family. And at the same time, you get the influx of Turks into Anatolia, and they're nomadic before they begin to settle down somewhat. So you get this different kind of settlement. And then after Manzikert, you continuing decline of Byzantium. 1176, there's this terrible defeat and the loss of Anatolia. So Byzantium becomes mainly European, what we call the countries that were Yugoslavia, Bulgaria, Romania. That's what was left of the Byzantine Empire. And in 1204, the Crusaders in the Fourth Crusade occupied Constantinople. They had been invited, and then the Byzantines couldn't pay them off what they had promised, so they took over. And it was not a great time for Constantinople. Here's this image, the famous image of the Byzantine emperor on the ground and the Seljuk leader standing on his neck. Whether it actually happened or not, we don't know, but that's the image coming down from those battles. Then the Seljuks themselves start to decline as more other Turks come and invade, and you get this settlement in the area called Cappadocia, or Cappadocia as the Turks call it. And that little blue line is sort of where part of where our tour went, in the middle of the country. But there is this Persian influence. So they're not far away from all these Middle Eastern civilizations. And in Cappadocia, it's famous now for its landscape. The erosion and the eruption of this stuff they call the Cappadocia Gorima Open Air Museum. And there are all kinds of things like this that it's very interesting for tourists to see this stuff. And you get the end of the nomadic outlook, that is to say, they're becoming more agricultural, settling down. And Konya itself, which is right there, there's Konya, which was the Sultanate. There's a decline of Konya. But here's the tourist side. The winds are such, the hot air balloons are very popular. I went up in one. What amazed me was how quiet it is up there. It's really quiet when you're up in the air. I wasn't as excited as other people for other reasons, but I loved the quiet. I mean, those little gondolas hold 25 people each, so you're shoved in there. This is we stayed in a hotel like that. Three sides of the hotel room were cave walls, but running water, electricity, but it's tricky. It's in the cave. It's very exciting. Yes, Harry.
What causes these pinnacle type caves?
Well, first of all, you have eruptions, in the plates, and erosion. That's what you're getting. We got erosion everywhere. It reminded me of the South Dakota Badlands, that kind of land formation. They also have, again, an underground city. It's not a real city, but these were for protection. People didn't live there, but they were able to move underground for certain periods. And again, it's a place you would visit. That's when I said it's a mixture of history and tourism. And I just thought people would be interested to see a little bit of that. Then that was pre-Christian. Now, Christian Turkey, here's a church cut right in the rock in Cappadocia. I don't know what these petroglyphs are from, whether it's more modern or not. I just can't answer you. But, you wander in and you look around, you see it's rock. And then this is from a poster, actually, images of paintings in churches. They're all over the place. What is this? Well, actually, it says it in English. The most frequently featured churches in the Gorema churches, Gorema being that area, that Cappadocia Gorema Open Air Museum. I find it very difficult to absorb all that stuff. The first place is incredible, and the second one incredible, and then third and the fourth. After a while, it begins to merge. But I also wanted to show you Turkish crafts. For example, these are tiles. The tulips that we have come from Turkey, and if this is that special. Let's see, this Turkish tulip with the little different shape. There, that's where Europe gets its tulips, and these are various designs. And that's mine. I bought it. It's a handmade piece of pottery. I didn't want to bring it. I was afraid of breaking it. If you come to visit me sometime, I'll show it to you. It sits on my table. I love the idea. It's a wine pourer. Somehow you put your hand through the middle, and then your servant can pour the wine with that. And Turkish rugs, of course, are also famous. You can really get some really nice rugs there if you like, and they'll arrange to ship it home for you. Well, Islam in Turkey. Here's this image, the Byzantine Seljuk Wars. The Byzantines, I mentioned this a few minutes ago, and this Battle of Manzikert, 1071, is celebrated today as the birth of the state of Turkey. That's, it's in the national legends. And for example, in 2018, the ruling AKP party, that's Erdogan's party, announced that in 2071, they will celebrate the 1000th anniversary of Manzikert. So, we talk about 1776, 1071. It's important in their self-image. And it's got nothing to do, well, I say Islam here, but it's not Islam, it's Turkey in this case. But that Battle of Manzikert suggested the debility of the Byzantine Empire, and that's why they called for help. And you get, first of all, when that battle took place, it cut off the roads for pilgrims to Jerusalem, for Christian pilgrims. And it showed how weak the Byzantine Empire was. And the Byzantine Empire called for help to the West. And this is also a period of whatever reason, Western Christianity is in an expansive mood. Following several centuries of Islamic expansion, you really get this Western drive. 1096, the First Crusade, if you recall, it also got me interested. I gave a course here on the Crusades. The First Crusade conquered Jerusalem, Antioch, and other places, and they stayed there for a couple hundred years until driven out. But the feudal ethos of the warrior prevented them from having a unified state. They're all, who's going to be in charge? So we're not going to, I don't want to make this a course on the Crusades, but it was really important, and it's still important in Islamic memory. If you recall, George Bush one time talked about a crusade in Iraq, and the word set off alarm bells in the Islamic world. Islam. The conversion of nomadic tribes to Islam started in the 8th century already. But Turkey has developed a reputation for a more moderate Islam than, say, Saudi Arabia or Afghanistan. It was true, and it still has that, even though there are issues going on. But here you have, I took this picture, people in Islamic dress on their cell phones, and they're interacting. This one on the right has bright colored clothing, just as sort of a symbol of, a modern kind of society. But you have a conversion of Anatolian Christians. There were lots of Christians there in the East, but the Byzantine Church really had a decline in the quality of its clergy. The Western Church also does in the 16th century. It's one of the strengths of the Lutheran drive in the Reformation. But here we're talking the Byzantine Church, which is Eastern Christianity. And then you get this 1204 Crusader occupation of Constantinople. It's a resentment against the Christianity and the Christian powers. You get the rise in Turkey of Sufism, which is a kind of mystical approach to Islam. And you have these Sufis who roam the steppes there. And sometimes it's weird. Sometimes they're naked or they're wearing animal horns. They're eccentric behavior, but they're talking about devotion and piety. Here's an example of a modern commemoration of Sufi saints. It's hard for me to figure out what this guy is doing, but it's a weird kind of celebration. But it was crucial in winning converts. The Sufism, it's emphasis on the individual, not a warrior, but your relationship to Allah. Well, Mevlana Celaleddin Rumi as he's called, 1207, 1273. He's really very famous as a poet, as a thinker. I remember a few years ago, I was at a singing camp, and they said, well, this is a poem by Rumi. And I said, who's Rumi? And the whole room jumped on me for not knowing who Rumi was. But this is a quotation. The object of existence is to feel that one exists and experience the presence of God in all existence. And divine love is a sole objective of spiritual life. This is his idea. I don't want to stop the share, but someone's not on mute. Could you please mute yourself? This is the tomb, the mosque at the Rumi's tomb. And also nearby is what's called a caravanserai. Caravanserai is or caravanserai, I'm not sure how to, Sarai. Okay, all of the Turkish speakers here told me. It's on the Silk Road. There were lots of these. And I had no notion of what they were like. They're big. They're these walled places where you can come in and stay for up to 3 nights, protects you at night. And on the right, you see this interior courtyard. Bring your animals in and you're safe. And it really was the secret to the success of the Silk Road coming all the way across Central Asia into, in this case, into Anatolia. And you can visit this caravanserai. It's very interesting. Whirling dervishes are another thing that we know about. Their ceremony is called the Sema. This is a picture of whirling dervishes. And they're part of Sufism. There are 6 parts to the Sema, ending with a prayer for peace of the souls of all prophets and all believers. And they talk about, in the ceremony, a mystical journey of your ascent through love. You desert your ego, find truth, and you arrive to the perfect. And again, this is this emphasis on the individual as opposed to community. And these are, they generally don't let you take pictures, but after the ceremony is over, they give you a short period where you can take it. Right hand up, left hand down. There's some symbolism in that, but it's really very interesting to see this. And the Sufis had a tremendous impact on Islam in Turkey. Well, back to politics. In the 19th century, Turkey was called, quote, the sick man of Europe, which meant that the imperialist powers in the West were able to extract everything, as it says in this cartoon, the sick man of Europe is being doctored at last, as the Westerners. There's the one with the top hat is obviously British. The one on the other side is French. And let's have a peace, P-E-A-C-E or P-I-E-C-E. There's something called capitulations. That is, they kept lending money to Turkey in exchange for certain rights, controls, extraterritorial rights in the cities. Turkey today is under tremendous debt pressure. Now, they have, whether they're going to be subject to this again, I don't know. We saw what happened in Greece with the need to restructure the debt. And so all of that building under Erdogan, not just housing, roads, rivers, he's got tremendous notions of grandeur. For example, one of the latest projects is to build a canal which will parallel the Straits of the Bosporus. Billions and billions of dollars, and everyone says we're not sure what benefit it will have, but we'll see if we get there. This earthquake has changed a lot of things. Anyway, the Ottoman Empire, what I call an old style empire, that is to say, with little local lords everywhere, in an age of imperialism, where the imperialist power is sending in their agents and sucking the economic benefits out of the area being subject to imperialism. And so when the First World War comes, Turkey sides with Germany for various reasons. One of them is that France and Britain are not such great friends. Well, Turks and Armenians. This is this horrible story. Here's a picture of the expulsion of the Armenians in 1915. They were claimed that you defined them as enemies, and they are driven out. And it's not genocide in the sense of the Nazis having central camps, but as people walk along, they're killed. And by the way, there are Kurdish tribes who are very much involved in this, as well as the Turkish army. The Turkish bandits, nomads, took advantage of these poor people being driven along. So it's not just Turks. Today, of course, the Kurds are the new national enemy because most of the Armenians were killed. Yes.
Right, we have a friend in Maine who's part Armenian, and she said her father told her that the poorer people, the servants, were taken away, the upper class people were not.
Well, it depends where you lived.
You think?
It depends where you live. I mean, the Armenians in Constantinople more or less survived.
Yeah.
But in the villages, they did not.
Yeah.
But Turks and Kurds, you read about that. And the Kurds are in the eastern area. It's interesting. They're in the same areas that Erdogan has his political support. But there maybe, whatever they read, maybe 15 to 20% of the population in Turkey is considered Kurdish, whatever a Kurd is. I guess you're defined it by language. So they're Sunni Muslims. So you have all these Kurdish groups, and they're, quote, freedom fighters whom we support. Don't think that any of these dissident groups are Democrats. We've seen it in many cases where previously subordinated people all of a sudden became not so nice, like the Armenians, like the Israelis. I mean, it does happen. But anyway, at the current time, the Kurds are the subject of Turkish oppression. We also have Turkey and Cyprus. We often, given all the current crises, we sometimes forget about Cyprus. But in the 1970s, when Greece seemed to be about to annex Cyprus, the Turks invaded the north and set up, I've forgotten what they call northern Cyprus, but there's only one country in the world, Turkey, that recognizes this Turkish state of Cyprus in the north. I just learned that these little green areas are still United Nations with UK troops there that tried to hold the peace. And you have buffer zone. It's a difficult situation. Don't know what's going to happen. We also have Gallipoli, which is on the straits, on the Dardanelles here. In the First World War, the notion of Winston Churchill often gets blamed for this, but he's not the only one. The quote, soft underbelly of Europe. I mean, you use these images which are ridiculous, underbelly. This is mountainous territory. The idea was you could defeat Turkey by driving up the straits, take over Istanbul. And it's French and British troops that almost succeeded, actually. And here, the arrow, I've drawn in this arrow, where the landings were. And it was, that's the term. The British troops are from Australia and New Zealand, Anzac troops. It is today still a kind of Memorial Day Memorial Day, Armistice Day, all rolled into one. It's still very poignant for people in Australia and New Zealand that so many of their people were slaughtered. When you think about the idea of the whole First World War, not just in Gallipoli, that the way to attack is to have hordes of people attacking machine guns. I mean, it's just a slaughter. It's terrible. So there is this Anzac tradition. There is Anzac Day still of the in the national memory in Australia and New Zealand, even though they're not I guess they're still in the Commonwealth, but they're not in the Empire, and they still remember this in their national mythologies. What they did is attack these ridges. They made some mistakes in landing. Camille Ataturk, is the hero on the Turkish side. Barely came in time to defeat the invaders. As he said, there's some quotation from Ataturk, I don't ask you to live for your country, I ask you to die. And so plenty of Turks suffered at the time of the Gallipoli landings. And there are a bunch of movies which are very graphic to see what happened in that time. Here's the legend of Ataturk. There he is. He wasn't called Ataturk at the time, Kemal Pasha. Mustafa Kemal Pasha. Pasha is a rank in the army. Mustafa Kemal. And there he is with this picture of him. By the way, he was born in, the city in the west. You remember the name? Salonika, now called Thessaloniki. Lots of Turks come from Salonika. But no longer. We'll see what happens. See, after the First World War, you have a Greek prime minister, Venizelos, with these images of a great Greek empire. And he is encouraged by the British to act on this. I mean, there were other actors too. And the Greeks, after the First World War, invade here into Anatolia. There are many, many Greeks living there, all along the coasts here, all the way up along the Dardanelles, the Bosphorus, and on the Black Sea. Many tens of thousands of Greeks have been living there for centuries. But when the Greek armies came, they were really vicious, burning places, killing people, and they outran their supplies. Ataturk, Kemal Pasha, organized the resistance, and you get a pushback against those Greek invaders. Eventually, the Turks then become the oppressors, and they not just defeated Greek armies, they drove out the Greeks. This is called population exchange. I mean, in 1923, that's what happens. But it was a horrible situation. Anytime you have these mass movements of people, There are lots of people who suffer and die. I'll come back to that in a second. I just wanted to point out that these clashes with Greece have not ended because, we have something, what are territorial waters of a country? Well, here's Greece with its claims. Here's Turkey with its claims, and they're overlapping claims. And why is it important? Because of underwater gas and oil. It's and in fact, this fight over here between Israel, Lebanon, and Egypt, same kind of thing. But this is the case with Greece and Turkey. 1921 to 23 is this population exchange. It's a tragedy of Turks and Greeks. This is a statue in commemoration. I mean, the Turks deny things happened to the Armenians. They do not deny it about the Greeks because there was suffering on both sides here. But this is just a statue that I saw in a town, 1923, 2013, a memorial statue. This is a painting that you'll see copies of in many places. That is Turks saying goodbye to their Greek neighbors. And when they understood the tragedy of it, but they were just forced out. And that, as I say, it's a painting somewhere and it's reproduced in many places. It's a horrible memory, a horrible thing. I've forgotten. I think maybe I say about 1 million Greeks are expelled from Turkey and 500,000 Muslims from the West, from Greece. And I mentioned Salonika for Ataturk. It's still sort of an image of people have the old home in Salonika, or Thessaloniki, as the Greeks call it. There's
the majority, though, of the population of Salonika was Jewish.
The majority of population of Salonika was Jewish, and they died in Auschwitz.
Right.
That's but the whole area around it, and even today, Greeks call that area Macedonia. They're very upset when you have the Republic, what's now called the Republic of Northern Macedonia. They refused to recognize Macedonia until it changed its name so that it would not be a claim on that area. That's more Greek than Turkish, but I just wanted to show you a little bit about Istanbul. I guess I'm going through this faster than I thought I would. Emperor Constantine set up a city there in the 4th century, named it after himself, Constantinople. I just want to talk about the Hagia Sophia, this great church. You hear about it was set up in 537. 1453, it became a mosque. 1937, it became a museum. 2020, it became a mosque again. This is what it looks like from the outside. This place where, when you go to Istanbul, people want to visit. It is worth visiting. It's very interesting. And you can go in even as a mosque to see. This is the inside of the place. It's quite an image. Although, there are 1 million people shoving and you're taking off your shoes to go in the mosque, and where are my shoes? Older people can't, there's no place to sit down. I help somebody get his shoes on because it's difficult for all of us to bend down as we get older. But well, they call it a mosque, and there's a section set off for praying, but it's still a tourist center in the same way as it's been in the past. Second. There's an interior of Hagia Sophia.
Hagia actually means holy.
Yeah, Saint Sophia.
Right.
And if people want to know what those circles say up at the front, the one on the right says Allah, God, and the one on the left says Muhammad.
All right.
Larry, repeat that for the Zoom.
Chava was saying that the two circles in the background or upper background, one on the right says Allah and the other says Muhammad. And at the same time, you have a surviving mosaic image of Christ, even though this is a Muslim site now. Constantinople itself was the great walled city. Here's an example of a current aqueduct still up, standing up. And this is a restored wall of the city. I give this here to try to give some idea of why it was so difficult to conquer Constantinople. It withstood many attacks. How the Christians got him in 1204, I don't know. It must have been let in part. But here is a painting by Eugène Delacroix, Entry of the Crusaders into Constantinople. That image was there, the 1204 occupation. If you've been in Venice, lots of the relics from Constantinople are there in Venice because they grabbed it. For example, these horses you can see in Venice, they come from Constantinople, 1204. In 1453, it was finally taken by the Turks. There's a painting of Mehmed II, the conqueror entering Constantinople. And it wasn't an easy thing. There's this, the Turks, the Byzantines had strung a chain across the border. You could not get through. The Turks lifted the boats up, they set up rowers and carried them around the city to be able to approach the city with their ships. Even then, it was not so easy. But essentially, this is a sign of the end of walled cities because of cannon. I mean, if you go to a frontal assault on a city, you can only win before cannon. You can win by a siege if you can cut off water and food, but you really can't get through. But the cannon make a difference. This is this giant cannon. There was one by the Italians were on both sides in the conquest of Constantinople. There's a recent Turkish series on Netflix, talks about the conquest of Constantinople that you can see, fabulously popular in Turkey. It's like we watch our old cowboy movies. This was the thing, the conquest of Constantinople. And I found it very interesting to watch how the Turks attacked and how the Byzantines defended it. Interestingly, there's another 10-part series that followed of Mehmed II versus Vlad the Impaler, because they tried to dominate Romania or Transylvania. And so Mehmed II is prior to Suleiman the Magnificent, whom we saw at the beginning, but these are probably the two most famous sultans of the Turks. Istanbul itself has this famous Grand Bazaar, what the gallery in Philadelphia would like to be. I mean, there are many, many aisles and corridors with hundreds and hundreds of vendors. There's so many jewelry vendors. I asked, what's the difference between one jewelry vendor and another? No one could really tell me unless you knew somebody. Here's another picture of, in this case, they're selling lighting. It's an interesting place to visit. Constantinople, I'm sorry, Istanbul also has these huge cisterns for water. I mean, it looks like a hall of some sort, but actually they would fill. There were 75 of these. That was to help them withstand a siege, this water supply. Not just the siege, but also because there are no wells in this. I don't think there are any wells in the vicinity. So this is the city's water supplies. You can go in and
It is now the supply?
not now.
Okay.
But this is a place where you visit now. It's sort of another visit place. The other visiting place, the Topkapi Palace, that's where the harem was, and it was the Sultan's center. If you recall, there was a movie in the 1960s called the Topkapi. And if you visit, you can still see that movie and see what's inside there. Some magnificent areas within the harem area. Remember, the harem is not for sex-starved sultans. I mean, he does have a lot of wives there, but this is a women's world, women and eunuchs. And there are some magnificent areas that have been set up as museums. And like a lot of other places, it can be very busy. But it's again, very popular for visiting. So as I said, I'm trying to combine this talk with history and tourism. And this is a bed in the harem. Let's see, what have I forgotten? I don't know. Tiles are very important in Turkish tradition. You don't get, the art does not have images of people, but the tiles are just incredible. And we saw that earlier when it showed Turkish art, and these are walls of tiles. There's a tile museum in Istanbul. There's also a place called the Blue Mosque, which wasn't open when I was there, but I think that's also well known for its tile work. And in conclusion, just here you have what is modern Turkish society. Ataturk banned the fez. Since the 1820s, the fez had been part of a civil servant's uniform, and Ataturk holds up a hat and he says, "This is a hat. It has a brim," meaning no fez. He drove through his changes. It wasn't easy for him. This is, he's father of his country. I mean, there's similarities to what Erdogan does, but there is a certain democratic tradition in what Ataturk was doing. And I just love this picture of this is a hat that has a brim. Erdogan and Islam. Well, in 1980, the generals outlawed the headscarf. And in 2008, Parliament lifted the ban of the headscarf. And it's seen as a symbol of radical Islam, but it's not necessarily. I mean, there are a lot of moderate Muslims who wear the headscarf. They see that's for modesty. Here's a lady, I think she's taking a selfie, but with a headscarf, sunglasses, lipstick, colorful dress. So, sometimes our newspapers play up the headscarf business too much. In 2013, they lifted a ban on women wearing headscarves in state institutions. This was an attack on them. It reminds me of what's going on in France even now. And in 2023, Erdogan says no individual has the freedom to insult Islam. And therefore, because Sweden is harboring terrorists, we're going to block Sweden's entry to NATO. I think that's in Denmark. This guy is burning the Quran, which is not a great thing. And I'd like to end with this poem by Rumi. We're back at his mosque, his tomb. It's a poem. He has lots of poems. There's a lot of quotations from it. The intellectual quest is exquisite like pearls and coral, but is not the same as the spiritual quest. The spiritual quest is on another level altogether. Spiritual wine has a subtler taste. The intellect and the senses investigate cause and effect The spiritual secret surrenders to the wonder. Okay. Those are the end of the slides. I can still have a few minutes for comments or questions. Both of you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Tell us about the food.
About the food.
Yeah.
I'm not as much of a foodie as other people, and I can't describe some of the stuff. You go to, oh, look, here's a local specialty. I don't remember what it was, but they like sweets for dessert. And the meals, you get a lot of very little pork because of the Islamic country. Lamb, a lot of lamb. I can't tell you much. I'm not really the person to ask about food. I get that question a lot, and I can't give you a good answer. Harry?
Is there a lot of still Greek animosity towards Greece? Because when we used to live in Greece, there was a lot of animosity towards the Turks. I wonder if it's reciprocated at all.
Is there animosity? Harry asks, is there still lingering animosity by Turks against Greeks? Probably not on a personal level, but on an international political level. You're clashing with Greeks in Cyprus. We saw that map over territorial waters. So I didn't hear, I guess I didn't talk to that many people, but they just, it's in the past. It's a long time ago. And then you were in Greece, what, in the 60s or 70s?
And it was certainly animosity then
Oh,
towards
yeah.
the Turks.
Right, but now a lot of those people have died off, and their children or grandchildren are adults, and they don't remember the stuff. Yes.
Larry, there's a question from Thomas Stone.
Oh,
Here to unmute herself.
Tama, unmute and you can talk.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I remember as a very, very young child hearing about how I had to eat my bread crust because of the starving Armenians.
Yeah.
Starving Armenians, and that meant that it was my responsibility to eat all the food put in front of me, including the bread crust. Thank you.
Yeah, I remember those notions because our answer, well, send it to them. That's what we would say as kids. Yes, Diane.
I would like to address the food issue. When we made a tour of Turkey, our bus would stop in gas stations and they'd say, here's lunch. We thought, gas station? And there would be buffets of vegetables, wonderful vegetables, eggplant 15 different ways, and all of the other things. So, Larry, it's a shame you're not a foodie because the food is wonderful in Turkey.
I stopped at a lot of those, what look like gas stations, but are actually restaurants that cater to tourist buses. You see the pumps, and all of a sudden, there's this room that can hold 50, 100 people. That's what Diane is describing.
I also I don't know if you can see my souvenir of Cappadocia.
Yeah, that's the caves.
Yeah. All right, that's it.
Okay. I think we're just about 12 o'clock. I thank you all for coming, and it's been fun talking about it.
Thank you, Larry. Thank you.